Sean Morris here, taking a look at Saturday's $200,000 guaranteed late pick for the Big A. And it's going to be headlined by an interesting renewal of the Busanda, and that's going to be race 8. And so we are going to kick off in race 6 with an approximate first post of 350. And I do think you have a viable single in this leg. And that's going to be the first horse you see in the PPs. That's Swell on the rail. I think there's a few things working for him. I think both of his last 2 races would be good enough to beat this field. And certainly last time, he ran very, very well, contesting a fast pace. So I do think the cutback to 5.5 furlongs is going to help him in this race. And even if he can't make the front from the rail, there is some other speed to his outside. But if he can't make the front, he's also capable of raiding. And I do think he could come from off the pace here if he needs to. He should be able to work out a good trip. As backups, or maybe you want to use them on equal strength with Swell, I think you got to look at Uncharted Course for Chris Englehart. The layoff is a little bit of a concern, but this horse has 2 back races. Each of his past 2 starts, actually, really seem to be turning a corner. I guess it's somewhat of a negative that he did get about 2.5 months off here, but he really did seem to be turning a corner in those races. And he's got a little bit of speed himself. I don't know that 5.5 works as well for him as it does for Swell, but certainly he has some appeal in here. And then a horse on the far outside, David Rocks. I don't like that he drew the far outside post in here, but he's got speed. I think 5.5 works for him. Again, the post is a little bad for him. I just don't know what kind of trip he'll be able to work out. And he's another coming off a bit of a layoff and off a dull effort. So I think you got to throw him in the mix just because he's got good speed, he's got ability. I mean, he's shown in the past that he's capable of winning a race like this. Just not sure what we're going to see from him from the far outside off of that little bit of layoff. Off a little bit of a layoff, but he's worth consideration in this race. Moving on to race 7, the horse I want to mention first here is Conspiracy. He got a good trip last time, but if he gets back to this race, I think they're all going to be running for second. I just thought it was a very, very strong race from him. That's been a live race since. I guess the negatives with Conspiracy are he was laid up for a little bit, too. He's been off for almost 2 months now, and that's not really a good sign because before that he was coming off a layoff of almost 6 months. And then, maybe you would have liked to have seen him jump up in class off that last race because I did think it was a very strong effort. Regardless, I mean, he's just got a lot of things in his favor. And again, he has an affinity for the inner track, and if he gets back to that last race, I think he's going to be very, very tough to beat. Another horse I think is worth inclusion in here is Morty's Miracle, and he got a great trip last time, too. I know he had to wait a little bit at the top of the stretch, but all in all, I thought it was a very, very good trip. But what he showed me is that I think he prefers 2 turns. He got to stretch out in his second start off the claim for John Toscano, and I thought he ran quite well that day, and is another who has shown an affinity for this inner track. So I think it was no fluke that once he got out to the mile distance last time on this inner track, we saw a much improved effort from him. So I think he's going to be tough in this race, third off the claim for John Toscano. I do also want to talk about the horse on the rail. That's Life's Reward. He ran he ran big last time, and that race definitely puts him in the mix. However, I'm a little dubious he'll be able to repeat it because, as we've seen at this meet, Danny Gargan has been very, very live, and it's been very difficult to claim off of him, too. So Greg DePrima, while I respect what he does as a trainer, I mean, he's a very solid trainer, it's going to be tough to keep him in that same form as Danny Gargan had him in. Moving on to the Busher. And this is a pretty interesting renewal of this race. You have to talk about the horses coming out of the Busanda. It was won by Floridora, who, in my opinion, not that she did anything wrong last time, she ran a good race. I think you kind of have to be against her in this race just because she got a great trip last time and was life and death to beat Skatouche, who is a good filly in her own right, but I just think Floridora will probably have to take another step forward, and she probably won't have the luxury of a trip like that in this race. The horse I'm keying on in here is Katniss the Victor. In the Maddie May, she was caught behind a pretty soft pace set by her stablemate and finished well through the lane. I thought it was a solid effort from her. Through 2 starts, she's definitely shown that she wants to go 2 turns. Each of them has been good efforts. And I know she's got to face open company now, but the speed figure she actually earned for that Maddie May when she finished second by a nose is the best last out number in this field. So I don't see this as a big step up in class for her. I think she fits very well with this group. And also, she's she's had to break from outside posts in each of her first 2 starts. I think she can show a little bit more speed than she's shown in those starts, and probably tracking what should be a moderate pace. The horse out of the Busanda I think you want is Dreams to Reality, and she's a wild card in this race, but got a really funny trip last time. She broke well, was up chasing the pace around the first turn, and just steadily dropped back down the backstretch without much reason. You know, it was a little interesting. You know, it didn't seem to be kickback or anything like that that was affecting her. She just plummeted through the field. Then around the far turn, she was actually steadied leaving that turn and stayed on well through the stretch. Her maiden breaker, I thought, was a pretty good effort, so I would expect her to rebound in here, and she should be pretty decent odds. And that's part of the appeal with her, because the Busanda, again, I didn't love the race as a whole, so I want a horse like her who's a little dirtied up off that race and could offer a pretty big payout in this race. One more unknown I think we should talk about is Whistling Straits, coming up from Gulfstream Park. Listen, she added blinkers last time, and it was the best race of her career by far. It was also her first race at a mile, so I think there are things to like with her. However, I'm not sure she was beating too much last time, so I would be a little skeptical of her, though she does have some appeal in here. Closing it out in race 9, I just like the 2 logical horses in here, and that's Blue Moon of Saratoga, a second-time starter for Todd Pletcher, taking a class drop. She set a very fast pace last time against Maiden Special Weight Company, faded in the stretch. Understandably so. It was a much better field. Again, that was a really hot pace that day, so I think she will be very, very tough in this race. And the other horse I like is one to her outside, Silly Face. I liked her last time. She was 5-1, which probably felt a little short in that race, but I thought she ran well. Wasn't the best field. It was at this level, but she was perched wide, stayed on well through the stretch. I thought it was a solid effort and makes her a major player in this race. Those are the 2 I want. Can't even really recommend anyone else in this race. I think the race really goes through those 2. So that's going to be it for this pick 4. Again, $200,000 guaranteed. Good luck.